My husband handed me the divorce papers and said, "You have 48 hours to get your things out. My new girlfriend owns this house now." I just smiled and agreed. But when she stepped foot in that house, she realized she had made the biggest mistake of her life. Hello everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, I'd love to know which city you're joining us from. Please feel free to share in the comments. Now, let me take you into this story. You know that feeling on a Friday afternoon? The week is finally over, the exhaustion is real, but there's that little spark of relief. You're just looking forward to getting home, kicking off your shoes, and letting the silence of your own space wash over you. That was me. I was driving home on the cross-county parkway, the traffic was its usual sluggish crawl, and I was mentally debating between ordering pizza for dinner or attempting to cook the chicken that had been sitting in the fridge for 3 days. The little, mundane decisions of a normal life. I remember thinking how much I was looking forward to a quiet weekend with my husband, Walter. Maybe we'd watch a movie. Maybe we'd just sit on the porch. Simple things. That's the thing about life, isn't it? It has a funny way of letting you settle into that comfortable rhythm right before it pulls the rug out from under you. When I finally pulled into the driveway, I noticed Walter's car was already there, which was a little unusual for him on a Friday. A small, strange detail. I walked in, dropping my heavy briefcase by the door, the familiar scent of our home, a mix of lemon cleaner and old books, greeting me. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I found him in the kitchen. He wasn't doing anything, just standing by the window overlooking the backyard, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. He had this tension in his shoulders that I knew all too well. It was his "I have bad news" stance. Tough day? I asked, keeping my voice light as I hung my keys on the hook. He turned from the window, and his face was a pale, unreadable mask. "You could say that," he said, his voice flat. "Lorraine, we need to talk." My stomach did a slow, cold somersault. "Okay," I said, forcing a small smile. "You sound like you're about to tell me you signed us up for a timeshare. What's up?" He didn't smile back. He just walked over to the kitchen island, where a thick, innocent-looking manila envelope was sitting. It hadn't been there a minute ago. He must have been waiting for the right moment. He picked it up, held it for a second, and then slid it across the granite countertop towards me. The sound it made, a soft, dry scrape, felt deafening in the silence. And that's when it happened. That gut-wrenching, movie scene moment when your husband hands you divorce papers like he's returning a defective toaster to Target. Apparently, Walter thought our 8-year marriage came with a satisfaction or your money-back guarantee. And my time was up. "Lorraine, I need you to sign these," he said. He wouldn't even look at me. His eyes were fixed on the envelope as if it held all the answers. I stared at it, my mind struggling to connect the dots. The quiet house, his tense shoulders, the envelope. It was a language I suddenly understood perfectly. "Sign what, Walt?" I asked, and I was proud of how steady my voice was, how it didn't betray the tremor that had just started in my hands. He finally met my gaze, a flicker of something, annoyance, maybe guilt, crossing his face before being replaced by a look of cold resolve. "The papers, Lorraine. The divorce papers. I've made things very generous for you." Generous. That word again. The last time he'd used it was when he generously let me handle the emotional fallout from his mother's funeral while he went on a necessary golf trip to clear his head. I almost laughed, a bitter, sharp sound, but I bit it back. I let the silence stretch, forcing him to fill it, to own the ugliness of what he was doing. And, he finally added, clearing his throat as if something was stuck there. "I'm going to need you to be out of the house in 48 hours. Amber's moving in this weekend, and she needs space for her, well, for her meditation corner and her essential oil collection." Amber. His 25-year-old yoga instructor. The one with the flexibility of a pretzel and, as I was quickly learning, the moral backbone of overcooked spaghetti. I'd been watching this train wreck approach for months, seeing the warning signs flash brighter and brighter, the new clothes, the secret smiles at his phone, the sudden interest in things he used to mock. But hearing it officially declared, it still felt like getting slapped across the face with a wet fish while someone played sad trombone music in the background. 48 hours, I repeated, my voice a flat echo. I finally reached for the envelope. My fingers felt numb, detached from my body, but they were steady as I broke the seal. It was the kind of calm that makes emergency room nurses nervous. Inside, the legal documents stared up at me, cold and impersonal. My own profession, the world of clauses and statutes that I navigated every day, was now twisted into a weapon against me. "That's generous of you," I said again, the sarcasm dripping from every word. "Considering you've been planning this hostile takeover since July." Walter had the audacity to look surprised, genuinely shocked, like he'd just discovered water was wet. He sputtered, taking a half step back. How did I know?" I cut him off, my lawyer brain kicking into high gear, automatically scanning the papers for the usual amateur-hour mistakes cheating husbands make when they think they're smarter than their lawyer wives. "Honey, let's not be naive. You started going to yoga class 5 times a week and suddenly developed a passion for green smoothies. You, a man who considers ketchup a vegetable. You're about as subtle as a marching band in a library." I flipped a page, my eyes catching a detail in the asset declaration that made my blood run cold. He was trying to claim half of my inheritance. "Plus," I continued, my voice hardening, "you've been taking business trips to places that don't have business conferences. Sedona, Arizona doesn't exactly scream financial advisory summit, does it, Walt? The beauty of being married to someone for 8 years is that you know exactly which buttons to push to make their left eye twitch." Walters was doing a full cha-cha as he realized his master plan had more holes than a colander in a shooting gallery. "Look, Lorraine, don't make this difficult," he said, and there it was, that patronizing tone he'd perfected during our marriage counseling sessions. The ones he'd suggested right around the time Amber started posting cryptic quotes about following your bliss on Instagram. He was trying to manage me, to handle the situation. "Amber and I have found something real. Something authentic. She understands my spiritual journey." I nearly choked on the air I was breathing. I had to set the papers down on the counter with deliberate precision before I crumpled them into a ball. My spiritual journey. Walter's idea of a spiritual journey was finding the motivation to separate his darks from his lights in the laundry. This was a man who thought chakras were a type of exotic cheese and believed meditation meant thinking about his golf swing while sitting in traffic. "Your spiritual journey," I mused, looking him dead in the eye, letting him see the contempt that was finally boiling over. "Is that what we're calling it now? Is that the enlightened term for a middle-aged financial advisor getting seduced by a woman young enough to be carded at Applebee's? Don't be bitter, Lorraine. It's not attractive," he shot back, his guilt turning into anger. "Bitter? Oh, sweetie. I hadn't even started warming up yet." See, Walter made one crucial, fatal miscalculation in his grand exit strategy. He saw the woman in the blazer, the wife who made sure his favorite shirts were always clean, the partner who organized their social life. He assumed that woman would collapse into a puddle of tears, that she'd beg him to reconsider, that she'd be too heartbroken to fight. What he forgot, what he so conveniently erased from his memory, was that I'm not just any lawyer. I'm a real estate attorney who specialized in property law. And more importantly, I'm the granddaughter of Beatrice Caldwell, a woman who could find dirt on a saint and make them confess to jaywalking. As Walter stood there looking pleased with himself, probably mentally calculating how much younger his new girlfriend made him feel, I was already 3 steps ahead. Because while he'd been busy having his midlife crisis, I'd been doing what any self-respecting attorney does when their marriage starts smelling fishier than low tide in August. I'd been gathering intelligence. So I did something that completely threw him off. I smiled. A bright, wide smile that didn't reach my eyes, a smile that would make a shark jealous. "You're absolutely right, Walt," I said, my voice sweet as poison. "I shouldn't be bitter. Amber does seem like quite the catch. Tell me, how did you two meet again? I forget the details. His confidence faltered slightly, like a cell phone signal in a tunnel. He was expecting a fight, tears, screaming. He wasn't prepared for calm, calculated questions. I told you. At the studio. Where she teaches those private sessions. We connected on a deeper level. She sees the real me. The real him. Honey, I'd been living with the real him for 8 years. The real him who left dirty socks on the bedroom floor like little depressing breadcrumbs, who thought foreplay was asking if I was ready, and who once got food poisoning from gas station sushi on a dare. But sure, let's pretend his 25-year-old yoga instructor discovered his hidden depths between downward-facing dog and the swipe of his credit card. Well, I'm sure she does, I agreed, gathering the divorce papers with the kind of grace that comes from years of courtroom experience. I clutched them to my chest like a winning hand. In fact, I bet she sees the real you better than you think. Along with the real Raymond Sutton, the real Stanley Croft, and the real Clifford Vance. The color drained from Walter's face faster than water from a broken bathtub. It was a beautiful sight. What are you talking about? Who are they? Oh, nobody important, I said, turning and heading toward the stairs with my papers. Just some names that came up in my light reading. You know how I love a good mystery novel. Especially ones with plot twists that make you question everything you thought you knew about the main characters. As I climbed the stairs to our bedroom, our soon-to-be not our bedroom, I could practically hear Walter's brain cells having an emergency conference call, trying to figure out what the hell I just said. The poor man probably thought I was bluffing. Like when I used to threaten to hide his golf clubs if he didn't load the dishwasher properly. But unlike his pathetic attempts at household responsibility, this wasn't a negotiation. This was a declaration of war. And he had just handed me all the ammunition I would ever need. After I closed the bedroom door, the adrenaline that had been holding me together started to fade, and a deep, shaking tremor took its place. My legs felt weak. I leaned against the door for a moment, the smooth, cool wood a small comfort against my back. The silence of the room was suddenly immense. I could hear the faint hum of the air conditioning, the distant sound of a siren. I looked around at the life we had built. The photos on the dresser, us in Italy, smiling, tanned, us at my sister's wedding, us on the day we brought home our golden retriever, Sunny, who we'd lost last year. My hand went to my mouth to stifle a sob that threatened to escape. The pain was real, a physical ache in my chest. 8 years. You don't just turn off 8 years of history, of shared jokes and private sorrows. For a moment, I let myself feel it. I let the grief wash over me, the sheer, crushing weight of his betrayal. He had made a mockery of everything we had built. He had chosen a cheap, shiny fantasy over our real, complicated, and sometimes difficult life. Then, I saw it. On my bedside table, there was a small, silver-framed photo of my Grandma Beatrice. She was in her late 60s in the picture, her hair a stylish silver helmet, her eyes sparkling with a mix of mischief and fierce intelligence. She was wearing a ridiculous feathered hat, but she wore it with such confidence you'd think it was the height of fashion. Looking at her face, I could almost hear her voice, that no-nonsense, grovelly tone she always used when she was about to give me a piece of life-altering advice. "Tears are for later, Lorraine," she would have said. "Right now, you work." Grandma Beatrice, God rest her suspicious soul, had been a private investigator for 30 years before retiring to teach me the fine art of uncovering secrets. She wasn't a warm and fuzzy grandmother. She didn't bake cookies, she taught me how to pick locks. She didn't read me fairy tales, she showed me how to read people, how to spot a lie in the twitch of an eye or the sweat on an upper lip. I remembered one summer, I was about 15, and I was convinced my then boyfriend was cheating on me. I was a crying, hormonal mess. Beatrice sat me down in her dusty office, surrounded by filing cabinets and the faint smell of stale cigar smoke. She pushed a cup of lukewarm tea into my hands. "Stop crying," she commanded. "Crying clouds your judgment. If you think he's a snake, don't cry about it. Go out and prove it. Find the snake trail. For the next week, she taught me the basics. How to research public records. How to run background checks. How to observe without being seen. It turned out the boyfriend wasn't cheating, he was just secretly taking ballroom dancing lessons to surprise me for the school dance. But the lessons Beatrice taught me stuck. Knowledge is power, Lorraine, she'd said, after we'd had a good laugh about the whole thing. But knowing when to use it, that's wisdom. That memory, that voice, was the splash of cold water I needed. The tears dried up. The shaking stopped. The grief was still there, a hot coal in my chest, but now it was surrounded by something else, cold, hard resolve. This wasn't just about a broken heart anymore. This was about justice. I walked over to my desk and pulled out my laptop, the same one I'd been using for the past 3 weeks to conduct what Grandma Beatrice would have called due diligence on a suspicious character. Because here's the thing about being a real estate attorney married to a financial advisor. We both know how to follow money trails. But only one of us inherited a grandmother who taught her how to follow people trails. And that was all about to make a world of difference. It had all started 3 months ago, in late September. It wasn't one big event, but a series of small, almost unnoticeable changes. It was the way Walter started guarding his phone, angling it away from me when a text came in. It was the new, expensive shirts that started appearing in his closet, a style far trendier than his usual boring Brooks Brothers fare. And then there was the smell. He came home one evening smelling faintly of sandalwood and something else, something cloyingly sweet. "What's that scent?" I'd asked, sniffing the air as he walked past me in the kitchen. He'd waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, it's just some incense from the yoga studio. Amber says it helps to open the heart chakra." I remember I just stared at him. Chakra? Walter was a man whose entire spiritual belief system revolved around the sanctity of the Sunday NFL games. The word chakra coming out of his mouth was as jarring as hearing a cat speak fluent French. That night, after he fell asleep, snoring, by the way, which I'm sure wasn't very spiritually aligned, I couldn't sleep. The nagging feeling in my gut was too strong. So, at 2 a.m, I crept out of bed, went to my office, and opened my laptop. The investigation began with a simple Google search, Amber Rivers Yoga Westchester. Her social media presence was the first red flag. Her Instagram was a carefully curated museum of a life that didn't quite add up. There were endless photos of her in complicated yoga poses, her lithe body twisted into impossible shapes. But it was the backgrounds that caught my attention. A private beach in the Hamptons. A 5-star resort in Sedona. A chic, minimalist loft in Manhattan. All overlaid with faux deep captions like "Inhale the future," "Exhale the past," or "Find your truth in the stretch." For a woman supposedly dedicated to the simple life and spiritual minimalism, she had an awful lot of expensive yoga equipment and designer athleisure wear. It screamed hypocrisy. I spent a few nights just observing, scrolling through months of her digital life. I saw Walter's account had started liking her photos about 4 months ago. First, it was just the yoga poses. Then, it was the more personal shots, Amber smiling over a cup of tea, Amber looking thoughtfully at a sunset. Then came the comments. Innocent at first. Great form. Then, more personal. You're an inspiration. It was a pathetic, digital breadcrumb trail of his midlife crisis. But the real smoking gun, the clue that broke the whole case wide open, was her professional website. It was sleek and full of promises of transformative healing and bespoke spiritual journeys. And on it, a testimonials page. It was meant to showcase her life-changing private sessions. There were 4 glowing reviews from 4 devoted students, each one accompanied by a professional headshot. My heart hammered against my ribs as I read them. First, there was Raymond Sutton, a prominent cardiologist from Scarsdale. He gushed about how Amber had helped him find inner peace after a stressful period of professional pressure. His photo showed a man in his late 50s with kind eyes and a weary smile. Next was Stanley Croft, who owned a chain of car dealerships in Connecticut. He praised her for helping him reconnect with his true self after a devastating personal loss. His picture was of a hearty, backslapping kind of guy, but his eyes looked haunted. Third was Clifford Vance, a high-powered hedge fund manager from Greenwich. He wrote that Amber's guidance was invaluable during a time of personal crisis that threatened to derail his entire career. He looked sharp and ruthless in his photo, every inch the Wall Street shark. And the fourth? The fourth testimonial was from my dear husband, Walter Daniels, financial advisor extraordinaire. He credited her with opening his eyes to a more authentic way of living, away from the soulless pursuit of wealth. He looked so proud in his photo, so enlightened. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. The funny thing about rich, married men having a midlife crisis, they're not nearly as original as they think they are. They're all reading from the same sad, predictable script. A cardiologist, a car dealer, a hedge fund manager, and a financial advisor. They were all successful, all of a certain age, and all, I suspected, deeply unhappy in some way. They were perfect prey. This was no longer just about my husband's affair. This was a pattern. This was a business. A little more digging, and by digging, I mean using the professional databases and investigative tools I had access to as a lawyer, skills Beatrice had drilled into me since I was 12, revealed that Amber Rivers wasn't even Amber Rivers. Her real name was Ashley Rodriguez. She had a string of previous addresses in Florida and California, and a couple of minor legal scrapes involving petty theft. She had reinvented herself completely. The woman was running a rotation system that would make a baseball manager proud. She was a professional predator, a con artist who had perfected her craft. And my husband wasn't her great love, he was just her weekend client. It was a brilliant, predatory little ecosystem she'd built. I started a spreadsheet, a habit from my work. I cross-referenced their social media, their business schedules, and Walter's credit card statements, which I had access to. A clear, sickening picture emerged. Mondays and Wednesdays were for Raymond, the cardiologist. His wife, I found through public records, was a well-known philanthropist. I bet she thought her husband was at a late-night cardiac seminar. In reality, he was funding Ashley's Manhattan studio rental, the one she claimed was for advanced teacher training. The rent was $5,000 a month. Tuesdays and Thursdays belonged to Stanley, the car dealer. His spouse believed he was attending grief counseling after the passing of his father 6 months ago. A noble excuse. Stanley was paying the car lease on that gleaming white BMW she drove to their private sessions. A very nice car for a humble yoga teacher. Fridays were for Clifford, the hedge fund manager. He had convinced his wife he was in intensive therapy for a gambling addiction he'd developed from the stress of his job. Instead, he was funding Ashley's weekend retreats to sacred energy sites that just so happened to be 5-star spa resorts. I found the receipts for a trip to a place in the Berkshires that cost more than my first car. And my sweet, gullible Walter? He got the weekends. He was covering the rent on the chic little apartment she kept in the city as her meditation sanctuary. His salary, the money that was supposed to be building our future, was paying for her fake serenity. The most beautiful, most diabolical part of her con was how she'd convinced each of them that they were saving her. It was a masterclass in manipulation. I found some of her old, supposedly deleted social media profiles under her real name. It was a treasure trove. She had a playbook. To Raymond, the doctor, she was a fragile artist escaping an abusive ex-boyfriend. He was her protector. To Stanley, the grieving son, she was a brilliant young woman crushed by student debt from a degree in art history. He was her benefactor. To Clifford, the high roller, she was supporting her family through a difficult, unspoken tragedy involving a sick mother. He was her hero. And to Walter? Walter thought he was her knight in shining armor, her financial savior. He was swooping in to save the misunderstood artist from the cruel, practical world that just didn't appreciate her spiritual gifts. He wasn't just having an affair, he was performing a noble rescue. I had to admire the craftsmanship. It was sick, but it was brilliant. The documentation I'd gathered read like a how-to manual for modern relationship fraud. I had screenshots of text conversations she was having with all 4 men simultaneously, sometimes within minutes of each other, toggling between her different personas. I had financial records showing deposits from multiple sources into accounts under both her real and fake names. I even found a detailed, color-coded calendar she kept on a cloud server she'd carelessly left unsecured, with notes on which emotional manipulation technique worked best on each target. For Walter, the note read, "Responds well to praise of his intelligence. Ego is fragile." But here's where Ashley, our dear Amber, made her fatal error. She got greedy. And she got lazy. See, a smart con artist knows when to cut and run. They take the money, they disappear, and they set up shop in a new town with a new name. But our girl had gotten so comfortable in her web of lies that she'd started making long-term plans. Plans like convincing my husband to file for divorce so she could move into our house. The grand prize. The house that, according to the property record she'd apparently never bothered to check, wasn't Walter's to give. It was owned by Caldwell Property Holdings LLC, a company I'd established when we bought the place 6 years ago. And where did the money come from? It was funded entirely by my inheritance from Grandma Beatrice. A point I had made sure was legally ironclad in our prenuptial agreement, an agreement Walter had scoffed at the time. My grandmother had left me a significant amount of money, but with one condition, that I use it to always protect myself. Never let a man be your only financial plan, Lorraine, she had told me. Love is wonderful, but a good lawyer and your own LLC are better. So as I sat there in our bedroom, the sounds of Walter pacing downstairs a dull thud-thud-thud against the floorboards, I felt the last of my grief burn away, leaving behind something clean and hard as steel. He was probably on the phone with her right now, trying to figure out how I knew those names. I opened my secure email account. I began composing what would undoubtedly be the most satisfying group message of my entire legal career. The recipient list was small, but it was a nuclear arsenal. Brenda Sutton, Valerie Croft, and Joyce Vance. I had found their personal email addresses through the same professional networks I used for my work. The subject line was simple, designed to bypass spam filters and pique curiosity, a matter of mutual interest regarding our husbands. And the body of the email was a masterpiece of professional restraint and deadly precision. Dear Mrs. Sutton, Mrs. Croft, and Mrs. Vance, I typed, my fingers flying across the keyboard. My name is Lorraine Daniels, and I am Walter Daniels' wife. I am writing to you today because I have discovered some information that I believe deeply concerns all of us. It involves a woman who may be known to your husbands as Amber Rivers, a yoga instructor. Her real name is Ashley Rodriguez. For the past several months, she has been engaged in a systematic scheme involving our husbands. I have compiled extensive documentation to support this claim. I believe it is in our best interest to have a conversation at your earliest convenience. I am available immediately. I attached one single, damning piece of evidence to the email, a screenshot of Ashley's color-coded calendar, clearly showing the names Ray, Stan, Cliff, and Walt scheduled on different days of the week. It was irrefutable. I hovered my mouse over the send button. This was the point of no return. The moment I clicked this, the quiet, orderly life I had known would be blown to pieces. But it was already in pieces, wasn't it? Walter had already planted the bomb. I was just choosing the time and place of the detonation. I hit send at exactly 6:47 p.m. on Friday, October 13th. The timing, I'm sure, is something Grandma Beatrice would have appreciated for its poetic justice. Then, I sat back, took a deep, steadying breath, and waited for the beautiful, coordinated chaos to begin. I didn't have to wait long. I went downstairs to make myself a cup of tea, my hands surprisingly steady now. Walter was in the living room, on his phone, his voice a low, urgent murmur. He saw me and immediately ended the call. He looked pale and rattled. "Who was that?" I asked, walking past him towards the kitchen. "Just a client," he lied, his eyes not meeting mine. The lie was so flimsy, so pathetic, it was almost insulting. I just nodded and continued to the kitchen. As the kettle began to whistle, my phone, sitting on the counter, started buzzing. It was a number I didn't recognize, but the Scarsdale area code told me everything I needed to know. The first soldier was reporting for duty. I answered, putting it on speaker. "Lorraine Daniels." "Mrs. Daniels, this is Brenda Sutton," a voice said. It was crisp, controlled, and had the kind of steely edge that comes from years of prosecuting criminals. There was no panic, just pure, unadulterated fury being channeled into focus. "I received your email and the attached file. I'm looking at it now. Are you absolutely certain about the authenticity of this document?" "Mrs. Sutton," I replied, matching her professional tone. "I'm a real estate attorney. I don't make allegations without triple-checking my sources. But you don't have to take my word for it. In a moment, I will forward you a secure link to a cloud folder. In it, you will find timestamps from social media, financial records I obtained legally through my husband's accounts, and enough photographic proof to convince a jury of skeptics. Your husband's cardiac rehab seems to involve a lot of expensive dinners at a restaurant called Le Bernardin and receipts from a jewelry store on Fifth Avenue." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end, followed by a silence that was more terrifying than any scream. It was the sound of a powerful woman's world shifting on its axis. Then, a single, cold word, "understood." "Send the link." I had just hung up when the next call came, this one from Connecticut. It was Valerie Croft. She didn't sound controlled, she sounded like a barely contained hurricane. "Is this a joke?" she demanded without preamble. "Because if this is some kind of sick prank, I swear." "It's not a joke, Mrs. Croft," I said calmly. "Check the dates on the calendar against your husband's grief counseling sessions. I believe you'll find they align perfectly. Especially the ones that coincide with weekend trips to the Miraval Spa Resort in the Berkshires." "That son of a," she started, her voice cracking with rage. "He told me he was going there to honor his father's memory. That bastard." There was the sound of something smashing in the background. "The file. Send me the goddamn file." By 7:30 p.m., I had Joyce Vance on a three-way call with the other two wives. She was different from the others. Cold, analytical, and utterly devoid of emotion. She was all business. "I've reviewed the preliminary data," she said, her voice like ice. "The financial leakage is significant. Clifford has been liquidating small stock positions. It's death by 1,000 cuts. I want to see the full financial trail. I have forensic accountants on standby." And just like that, the Council of Wronged Wives was formed. Let me tell you, listening to three wealthy, intelligent, powerful women discover they'd been played by the same amateur-hour con artist was like attending a masterclass in coordinated fury. Ashley had made a catastrophic mistake. She had assumed she was dealing with meek, unsuspecting victims. She had no idea she had just declared war on a former prosecutor, a marketing CEO, and a Wharton MBA. "Ladies," I said, settling into my desk chair, a cup of tea in hand, feeling the satisfaction of a general addressing her troops. "I believe our interests are aligned. This woman hasn't just betrayed us, she's committed actionable fraud. I propose we handle this with the precision and thoroughness it deserves." A coordinated response. The chorus of agreement was music to my ears. By 8 p.m., our group text chain was a flurry of activity that would make a Pentagon strategy team jealous. The plan came together with terrifying efficiency. Brenda, the prosecutor, was our legal eagle. She was already drafting preliminary reports to the fraud divisions in 3 counties, the state attorney general's office, and had a friend at the IRS on speed dial. "Tax evasion is the easiest way to get them," she texted. It's not glamorous, but it's effective. Valerie, the marketing guru, was our digital warrior. She was an expert at digging through the hidden corners of the internet. Within an hour, she had uncovered Ashley's real name, her past addresses, and 2 of her previous aliases. Her digital footprint is sloppy, she reported. I'm tracking down every fake review, every fabricated testimonial. I will dismantle her online persona piece by piece. Joyce, the financial wizard, was our money tracker. Leave the money to me, she wrote. Using her connections, she was already tracing the complex web of bank accounts, identifying shell companies, and documenting the flow of cash from her husband's accounts into Ashley's. He's been making regular wire transfers to an LLC called Golden Lotus Wellness. It's a shell. I'll have it cracked open by morning. And me? I was the coordinator. The field commander. I was orchestrating the whole beautiful symphony of justice from my bedroom while simultaneously preparing for the grand finale. Because I knew Ashley was coming. She was arrogant. She was greedy. And Walter had just told her he was filing for divorce. She would be coming to claim her prize. And I knew exactly when she was planning to arrive, thanks to the tracking app I discreetly installed on Walter's phone weeks ago. Thank you, Grandma Beatrice, for teaching me about the importance of digital surveillance. She was planning to surprise him with a celebration dinner. Tonight. At 8:45 p.m., as I was reviewing a file Brenda had sent over, Walter worked up the courage to come upstairs. I heard his slow, hesitant steps on the stairs. He knocked softly on the bedroom door, the same door I had slammed in my mind 1,000 times in the last few hours. Lorraine? Are you okay up there? You've been awfully quiet. Just packing, sweetheart, I called back, my voice light and breezy. I didn't look up from my laptop, where I was highlighting sections of a document detailing Ashley's fraudulent business filings. You know how thorough I am with important projects. About what you said earlier, he stammered through the door. Those names. Raymond and the others. Oh, that, I said, waving a dismissive hand at the empty air. Don't worry about it, Walt. I'm sure it's nothing important. Just some coincidences I noticed while researching Amber's business. You know how paranoid lawyers can be when it comes to due diligence. I could practically hear his sigh of relief through the solid oak door. Right. Right, of course. Well, let me know if you need any help with the boxes. I'll be sure to do that, I said. Poor Walter. Thinking he just dodged a bullet when he was actually standing directly in front of a cannon that was about to fire. The next hour was a flurry of text messages. From Valerie, social media profiles deleted across all platforms as of 10 minutes ago. Someone's running scared. From Joyce, bank accounts showing unusual activity. Large cash withdrawals started an hour ago at an ATM in the city. She's trying to liquidate. From Brenda, filed preliminary reports with fraud divisions in 3 counties and sent a tip to the IRS. This is going to be fun. The real entertainment, however, started at exactly 9:45 p.m. when I heard the distinct purr of a high-end engine pull into our driveway. I walked to the window and parted the curtains. There it was. Ashley's white BMW, the one Stanley Croft was paying for, parking right behind Walter's Mercedes. She bounced out of the car. She was carrying takeout bags from that ridiculously expensive organic place in town. She was wearing skin-tight yoga pants that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget and a smile that could sell ice to penguins. She looked confident, triumphant. She looked like a woman who thought she had just won the lottery. I quickly texted the group. The star of our show has arrived. Ladies, are you ready for the grand finale? 3 immediate responses pinged back. Ready. Let's do this. Time to end this charade. From downstairs, I heard the front door open and Ashley's voice, a breathy, pseudo-mystical tone she probably practiced in the mirror, calling out. Walter, honey? I brought dinner. I thought we could celebrate your new freedom with some organic quinoa Buddha bowls. Buddha bowls. Of course. Because nothing says I'm going to destroy your marriage and steal your house quite like appropriating Eastern philosophy and serving it with overpriced grain salads. I heard Walter practically tumbling down the stairs to greet her, his voice filled with the kind of guilty enthusiasm of a kid caught with his hand in the cookie jar who's trying to convince everyone he was just checking if the cookies were fresh. Amber! I told you to wait until tomorrow. Lorraine's still, she's still here. Oh, don't worry about that, came Ashley's confident reply, loud enough for me to hear clearly. After tomorrow, this will all be behind us. We can start fresh. In our beautiful new home. Our beautiful new home. The audacity was almost admirable. Almost. I closed my laptop, stood up, and straightened my blazer. I took one last look in the mirror. My eyes were clear, my expression was calm. It was time to go downstairs and introduce Ashley to the concept of consequences. But first, one final text to my new favorite group chat. Showtime, ladies. Hope you're recording this. I descended those stairs like a queen descending from her throne. Each step was deliberate, silent. I felt like I was walking into a courtroom where I already knew the verdict. They were in the kitchen. It was worse than I imagined. Her arms were wrapped around his waist from behind as he stood at the counter, and she was gazing adoringly at our granite countertops like she was already picking out new backsplash tiles. The takeout containers were spread across the island, and she'd even lit some candles, my expensive, hand-poured candles from that little boutique in Greenwich. It was a grotesque parody of the life I had built. They didn't hear me approach. They were too lost in their little bubble of triumph. Well, I announced, my voice cutting through their romantic tableau like a knife through warm butter. This is cozy. They sprang apart like two teenagers caught by their parents. Walter's face went white. Ashley, however, recovered quickly. She dropped her arms, turned to face me, and pasted on a condescendingly sympathetic smile. Lorraine, she said, her voice dripping with fake serenity. I'm so sorry you have to see this. I know this must be difficult. Oh, it's not difficult at all, I replied, walking further into the room. I'm actually glad to finally meet the famous Amber Rivers. Or should I say, Ashley Rodriguez. The effect was instantaneous and absolutely delicious. Ashley's carefully constructed serene mask didn't just crack, it shattered. Her face went through more color changes than a traffic light having a nervous breakdown, from tan, to white, to a pasty shade of gray. Walter looked like someone had just told him his 401k had been invested entirely in Monopoly money. Lorraine, what are you talking about? Walter stammered, but his eyes were darting nervously towards Ashley, not me. He was looking for reassurance that wasn't there. Ashley had gone completely rigid. Her hands, which had been resting on the counter, were now clenched into tight fists. I don't know what kind of game you're playing, she said, but her voice had lost that breathy, mystical quality faster than air from a punctured balloon. It was hard, and cheap, and had a faint tremor of panic. Walter told me you might try to cause trouble. He said you could be vindictive. Trouble? I let out a short, sharp laugh that echoed in the high-ceilinged kitchen. Honey, I haven't even started causing trouble yet. This is just the opening act. I pulled up my phone and set it on the counter, right next to the congealing Buddha bowls. In fact, I bet Ashley here knows exactly what I'm talking about. I bet she's wondering why her phone has been buzzing non-stop for the past hour. Let me guess. Calls from numbers you don't recognize? Frantic texts? I wonder why Brenda Sutton, Valerie Croft, and Joyce Vance have all been trying to reach you so desperately. Ashley's phone, which was indeed vibrating incessantly from her purse on the counter, suddenly seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds. She stared at it like it might explode. Which, considering the circumstances, wasn't far from the truth. My own phone rang at exactly 10:05 p.m., right on cue. It was Brenda. I answered it on speaker, because if you're going to destroy someone's life, you might as well do it with a little theatrical flair. Lorraine, it's Brenda Sutton, came the crisp, no-nonsense voice, clear as a bell in the silent kitchen. I'm here with Valerie and Joyce. We just wanted to let you know that we've finished filing our preliminary reports with the Fraud Division, the IRS, and the State Attorney General's office. We thought Ashley might want to know that she is now officially the subject of a multi-agency investigation. Ashley's face had now progressed from pale to a disturbing shade of green, landing somewhere around the color of old guacamole. Walter was looking back and forth between us, his mouth hanging open. What fraud division? He asked, his voice cracking like a 13-year-old boy hitting puberty. What are you talking about? Allow me, Walter. Valerie Croft's cheerful, professional voice came through the speaker. She sounded like she was thoroughly enjoying herself. Your girlfriend here has been running quite the operation. You see, she told you she needed financial help. She told Raymond Sutton she needed help escaping an abusive ex. She told my husband Stanley she needed help with her student loans. She told Clifford Vance she needed help with a family tragedy. For married men, for different stories, for different revenue streams. Very entrepreneurial, really. 4 men? Walter repeated, the words barely a whisper. He turned to Ashley, his eyes wide with a dawning, sickening horror. 4? Joyce Vance's voice joined in, crisp and matter-of-fact as a bank statement. That's correct, Walter. She's been collecting rent money for her apartment from you, car payments for her BMW from Stanley, studio fees from Raymond, and vacation funds from my husband Clifford. Simultaneously. We've tracked the wire transfers. It's all beautifully documented. The sound Walter made was somewhere between a wounded animal and a broken garbage disposal. Ashley, meanwhile, had grabbed her purse and was edging toward the door like a shoplifter who'd just spotted security. Ashley, I called out sweetly, my voice stopping her in her tracks. Before you go, there's one more thing you should know. She froze, her back to me. This house. The one you've been planning to move into this weekend. The one you told Walter would be our beautiful new home. It's owned by Caldwell Property Holdings LLC. She turned around slowly, her face a mask of confusion. The legal term meant nothing to her. What does that mean? She whispered. I let the moment hang in the air, savoring every second of her downfall. It means, I said, my voice clear and cold as ice, that my LLC, bought with my inheritance from my grandmother, is in my name, with my money. Walter's name isn't on the deed, the mortgage, or any of the legal documents. Our prenup is ironclad. That means that even when he divorces me, he has no legal claim to this property. You've been planning to move into a house that he can't give you, because he doesn't own it. You've been seducing a man for his assets, when his primary asset legally belongs to his wife. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the refrigerator humming. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked away the seconds as Ashley's entire world imploded. It was Walter who finally found his voice again, raw with a humiliation that was painful to witness, even for me. For men, he said again, the words full of disbelief. You've been seeing 4 men. Everything was a lie. Ashley's carefully constructed mystical persona crumbled faster than a sand castle in a hurricane. Walter, I can explain. Explain? He exploded, his face turning a shade of red that could stop traffic. Explain how you've been playing me for months? Explain the money? The lies? Was any of it real? Actually, Brenda's voice cut through the chaos from my phone, a final, decisive blow. She won't be explaining anything to anyone except federal investigators. We've traced financial transactions across state lines, documented identity fraud, and found evidence of tax evasion that would make Al Capone impressed. Ashley, or whatever your real name is, you're about to become very familiar with the inside of a courtroom. I'd advise you to retain a good lawyer. You're going to need one. Ashley made one last desperate play. She turned to Walter, tears suddenly streaming down her face, her beautiful features contorted into a mask of pathetic desperation. The mask was gone. This was the real Ashley Rodriguez. A cornered, terrified fraud. Walter, honey, none of this matters. We have something special. What we have is real. Special? Valerie's voice dripped with pure sarcasm from the phone. You mean like the special relationship you had with my husband every Tuesday and Thursday for the last 6 months? That's when Ashley finally cracked completely. The tears, the babbling excuses about how she never meant for it to go this far, how she just needed money for her sick mother, how she was going to tell everyone the truth eventually. It was a pathetic, predictable performance, and no one in the room was buying it. I had heard enough. I'd seen enough. I walked over and picked up my phone from the counter. Ladies, I said into it, my voice calm and final. I think our work here is finished. Thank you for your assistance. I ended the call. Then I looked directly at the whimpering woman by my door. Ashley. The door is behind you. I suggest you use it before I decide to press additional charges for trespassing. She fled. She didn't walk, she fled, scrambling out of our house faster than a tourist leaving Times Square on New Year's Eve. Her designer yoga pants and spiritual enlightenment retreated into the October night like smoke from an extinguished candle. The white BMW, Stanley's BMW, technically, squealed out of our driveway with all the grace of a shopping cart with a broken wheel. And then, there was silence. A heavy, suffocating silence, filled with the wreckage of a marriage. Walter just stood there, in the middle of our kitchen, looking like someone had just tried to explain quantum physics to him using only interpretive dance. He looked small, and old, and utterly broken. The untouched Buddha bowls sat congealing on the counter, their organic quinoa probably wondering how it had gotten mixed up in such a mess. The candles flickered, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. The storm had passed, leaving behind a devastation that was hard to look at. He finally looked at me, his face a hollow mask of confusion and betrayal. 8 years, Lorraine, he said, his voice as empty as a campaign promise. 8 years of marriage, and you knew about this for weeks? You knew all of this and you didn't say anything to me? I walked over to the island and, one by one, with deliberate ceremony, blew out the candles Ashley had lit. The scent of vanilla and deception faded. Oh, sweetheart, I replied, my voice not unkind, but firm. I learned a long time ago that knowledge is only powerful when you know exactly how to use it. I looked him in the eye, letting the full weight of the night, of his choices, settle upon him. Grandma Beatrice always said, timing is everything, in both revenge and real estate. If you're still listening, could you do me a huge favor and like this video, and just comment the number 1 down below? It lets me know you gave me a thumbs up, and it tells me that you're right here with me on this whole journey. Your support means the world to me, it truly keeps me going. Just comment the number 1, and then I'll tell you how the rest of this story played out. The beautiful, terrible thing about watching someone's fantasy implode is that moment of stark, brutal clarity. It's when they realize they've traded something real, with all its flaws and complexities, for something completely fabricated. Walter had given up a marriage with a successful attorney, a partner who had supported him, a life of comfort and shared history, all for a con artist who'd been juggling more men than a circus performer. The look on his face wasn't anger anymore. It was a deep, bottomless well of shame and self-loathing. While he was processing the rubble of his life, my phone was quietly buzzing with updates from my new favorite group chat. Brenda had already gotten a call back from a friend in the federal prosecutor's office who was, in her words, very interested in Ashley's multi-state operation. Valerie's digital deep dive had not only dismantled Ashley's online presence but had also uncovered 2 additional victims in a neighboring state who were now cooperating. And Joyce had successfully frozen several of Ashley's bank accounts, trapping the money she had tried to withdraw. The IRS is going to have a field day with this, I told Walter, my voice quiet in the now still kitchen. I scrolled through the evidence files on my phone, not to gloat, but to make him understand the reality of the woman he had chosen over me. Turns out Ashley hasn't been reporting any income from her various spiritual counseling services. Amazing how quickly enlightenment disappears when tax fraud charges and wire fraud felonies start flying around. The next few days were a blur. Walter moved out, quietly, shamefully. There was number 48-hour deadline for him. I let him take his time, packing his life into boxes under my watchful, silent gaze. It wasn't about kindness, it was about control. I was in charge now. By Saturday morning, the consequences were spreading through our social circles like a shockwave. The fallout was swift and brutal. Raymond Sutton's medical practice was suddenly under review by the hospital board. Stanley Croft's wife, Valerie, not only filed for divorce but used her marketing genius to launch a quiet but devastating campaign that saw his car dealership sales plummet. And Clifford Vance had quietly taken a leave of absence from his hedge fund while Joyce consulted the most ruthless divorce attorneys in New York. And Walter? Poor Walter discovered that being the fourth wheel in a con artist's rotation isn't exactly a resume booster in the competitive world of financial advisory. Word travels fast in Westchester County. His reputation was in tatters. A long-awaited promotion he'd been counting on vanished overnight. The divorce papers he had so confidently served me turned out to be as worthless as Ashley's promises of spiritual transformation. When you don't actually own the primary marital asset, your negotiating power is about as strong as a house of cards in a hurricane. My inheritance-funded LLC and my name on every legal document gave me all the leverage. The divorce was quick, and it was entirely on my terms. 3 months later, I'm sitting in the same kitchen where this whole drama unfolded. The winter sun is streaming through the window, glinting off the clean granite countertops. It's just me, my morning coffee, and the quiet satisfaction that comes from watching Karma work with the precision of a Swiss watch. I reclaimed my space. I had the living room repainted, a soft, peaceful shade of blue. I threw out the old, heavy drapes and let the light in. The house feels like mine again. The peace is mine. And the future is entirely mine to design. Ashley, I'm told from updates from Brenda, is currently out on bail and facing a laundry list of charges in 3 states. Her beautiful life, funded by lies, has evaporated. She's selling her designer clothes online to pay for her lawyer. The yoga instructor who promised spiritual enlightenment is about to discover the meditative qualities of a federal prison. Walter moved into a cramped studio apartment in White Plains. He's trying to rebuild his client base and his dignity, simultaneously. I hear from mutual acquaintances that he's a changed man, humbled, quiet, and full of regret. Last I heard, he'd sworn off yoga entirely and was considering taking up golf, a sport where the only thing that gets twisted is your swing. I don't hate him. I don't feel much of anything for him anymore, except a kind of detached pity. And what about my council of wives? Brenda, Valerie, Joyce, and I still maintain our group chat. The name of the chat is the boardroom. But now, it's mostly for sharing wine recommendations, celebrating our respective victories, and planning our monthly brunch. We forged an unbreakable bond in the crucible of betrayal. We turned a shared trauma into a powerful, lifelong friendship. Last week, we all went to a spa resort for the weekend, the same one Clifford had paid for Ashley to visit. We used my legal discount. It was wonderfully ironic. You know, the most beautiful part of this whole mess is that I didn't have to destroy anyone's life. I just had to reveal the truth and let the consequences handle the rest. Ashley destroyed her own life by building it on a foundation of lies. Walter destroyed his own marriage by choosing a cheap fantasy over a real, complicated reality. I just provided the documentation. I was the architect of the reveal, nothing more. Grandma Beatrice always said that justice isn't about revenge. It's about restoring balance to the universe. And sometimes, that balance requires a little help from well-organized evidence files and a group of very determined wives with excellent lawyers. These days, when people ask me about my divorce, I just smile and say it was educational. I learned that 8 years of marriage taught me exactly how much I'm worth, and it's significantly more than I'd been settling for. And if any future suitors think they can play games with Lorraine Daniels, well, let's just say I've got Grandma Beatrice's investigative skills, a law degree, and 3 of the most formidable best friends a woman could ask for. After all, karma might be patient, but it's got excellent credit. And it always collects. What do you all think? Have any of you ever had that moment where you knew you had to stop being a victim and start fighting back? Let me know your story in the comments below. It's a safe space here. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories. Thanks for listening.